T. Welcome to the command post. You know what it is. Post up and take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Lot to discuss today on this program. Of course, we'll get to so many more topics like Brandon Beane coming after Ron Rivera and the organization for poaching away J.D. McKissic. We'll save that for the live show tomorrow night, among other topics. But there are some things that I do want to knock down today, and we can further discuss them tomorrow night on the live show. Washington, the Command Post live tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Look forward to having you guys join me for that. But Washington brings back Danny Johnson, cornerback, is the first thing I want to talk about. That's a big move. I talked about two guys in particular on the live show last week that I said I wouldn't mind. Remember, I told you I was going to make a list of free agents, and I said, you know what? Scrap the list, because three of the guys that I had on my list got signed before I could even bring the list to you guys. And I said, I don't think we're going to be overly active and aggressive in free agency other than bringing back our own guys. And what have we seen thus far? Outside of Andrew Norwell, we've literally only re-signed our own guys. Bobby McCain, Charles Leno Jr., Cam Sims, J.D. McKissic, now Danny Johnson. I think they're going to bring back Cornelius Lucas. And the two guys that I mentioned to you, Danny Johnson, Cornelius Lucas, were the two guys that I said I wouldn't mind this organization bringing them back. As I look at the list of free agents that are available out there, and I don't think we're going to be overly aggressive, and we're not looking to pitch around a ton of money. These are guys that make a ton of sense. They know the system. They were really good players for us. They give us great depth, which is what we're looking to build on this roster. I said I would welcome both Danny Johnson and Cornelius Lucas back. That looks to be the case in both instances. There is a mutual interest between Cornelius Lucas and Washington. We'll see what happens and if anything materializes there. But Danny Johnson was another guy they were interested in bringing back. They exactly do that today. Danny Johnson back with the team. He offers us that nickel presence that I talked about. Now, again, I don't know if they're going to start him, if they're going to still look to upgrade the nickel, but he provides depth. That is something that he definitely brings to the table. I thought in his opportunities last year, he took full advantage, played well, also offers us great special teams play in addition to an emergency punt returner if need be. So with a guy like DeAndre Carter still floating out there, not re-signed, we don't have a punt returner. We don't have a kick returner currently on the roster. Danny Johnson can fill both of those voids if they don't go in that direction. I would assume that even if DeAndre Carter is not back, they'll go in a different direction with both the kickoff and punt return duties. But Dax Milne, if you recall, was also a guy that they trotted out there during the preseason last year. Maybe that's a guy that they have doing some of those duties as well. But that's another conversation for another day. We'll see if DeAndre Carter is back with this team. But Danny Johnson is back with this team, and that's good news. Really like Danny Johnson a lot. So another conversation is another guy that we signed. And so I talked about Andrew Norwell and his ties to Carolina and that Carolina to Washington pipeline that we've talked about for so long since Ron Rivera has gotten here, continues with another signing, this time of a defensive end in F.A. Obada. Now, if you remember, Ron talked a lot about F.A. Obada when he was referring to David Bada, a guy that is also in the Pathway program, something that F.A. Obada was in Carolina. He came over from London. We all know the story. For those of you who don't, this is a guy that had never really played football in his life, came over from London, got into the NFL Pathway program, worked his ass off, got an opportunity with the Carolina Panthers, took advantage of it, played really well for the Panthers. There was a stretch there back in like 2018, like a 2-week stretch where F.A. Obada was tearing it up for the Panthers, had like 3.5 sacks in a 2-week stretch. There was a game against Cincinnati, I vividly remember. They played the Bengals, and he dominated that football game. It was one of the reasons they won. And then there was this big expose on him, and he was walking around London showing everyone around where he came from, this, that, and the third. So the guy has some talent. He's big, he's athletic, he's physical. Ron Rivera has experience with him, obviously. And so he's going to be brought into the mix. He's a veteran. I thought we needed a veteran presence at defensive end. He provides us with that. He was with Buffalo last year. Again, you see the trend here, right? Carolina, Buffalo, Washington, they all, kind of are all kind of synchronized with one another because of the ties to Carolina from both programs. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, we're bringing on a guy that has ties to Ron Rivera, played with um, Buffalo last year with Sean McDermott in that group. And so this is a guy that comes in and gives us some depth at a position that I thought we desperately needed to address. I had it a little bit ways down the list of needs, but it was definitely something that I thought we needed to take a hard, long look at. And I like the move because, again, nobody was going to really come here with any real veteran chops. And we weren't looking to spend any money on a guy that was going to really come in here and change the game. And we're really hoping to get Chase Young, Montez Sweat back fully healthy and ready to rock and roll and dominating. And then you just want guys that can spell them that there isn't this tremendous drop-off. And I felt like there was a tremendous drop-off last year when you start talking about KC2. I like James Smith-Williams. I don't have a James Smith-Williams problem. If he's healthy, I don't mind him being one of the reserves coming into the game. But the problem was he was starting last year when Montez Sweat was out, when Chase Young was out. He was starting, and then that's when you get to the KC2 Hills and the Bradley Kings and the Shaka Tonys of the world, and that's when you start getting into trouble, and that's when you start getting taken advantage of in the run game, and that's when you start to see the drop-off in production getting to the quarterback. And I don't want to have that dramatic drop-off, and I think F.A. Obada kind of bridges that gap, slightly, and gives us another guy along with James Smith-Williams to complement our young group of edge rushers. So I like this move. I think it helps the overall depth of the unit. And again, F.A. Obada being on this roster is one step closer to KC2 Hill not being a key contributor. I don't necessarily need to have him off the roster. He can't be one of the first guys that goes into the game. And I think F.A. Obada being here and healthy is one step closer to KC2 Hill being a guy that may be on the practice squad or somebody that may be, on the roster on game day, but only for emergency, depth purposes only. And that's the way I like my KC2 Hill. So the big reason that I wanted to come and talk to you were two of them. And I may save the Terry conversation about his contract because I think we've gotten a blueprint for what Terry's contract is going to look like. A lot of you were freaking out when you saw Devontae Adams' deal with the Vegas Raiders, and then now Tyreek Hill being traded, and we're assuming his numbers are going to be monstrous. Don't be so fast and hasty to assume Terry's numbers are going to skyrocket because of those guys' deals. Their deals aren't anywhere closely related to what Terry is going to get. They're not in the same stratosphere. And I think there's a deal that is a lot more comparable to where we may end up finding Terry in this whole equation. Now, again, I still think there are other players that will sign that will alter what Terry ultimately signs for. But right now, the blueprint I'm looking at is DJ Moore, who just signed an extension with the Carolina Panthers. Their numbers are fairly similar. The numbers that he got in terms of an extension, roughly the extension was about $63 million over 3 years to add to the 1 year that he had left on his contract. And I think altogether his contract is something like 4 years. And I want to say it's like, I think it's like 4 years and it's like $81 million or something like that total. Slightly under 20. So I think it's more like 4 years, 79 or something. It's slightly under $20 million, per year for DJ Moore when you total it all up. And I think that's where Terry's going to end up. Now, again, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel will have something to say about that. Their numbers may push Terry over the top of that $20 million threshold. But as of right now, I think Terry's going to come in somewhere around $19 or $20 million. He's not going to be in that Devontae Adams $27 million, $28 million neighborhood. And whatever Tyreek Hill gets, which is going to be in asinine per year, he's not going to be in that neighborhood. So I think that's something we'll discuss more tomorrow on the show. But I kind of just gave you, what my thought process was anyway. But the real reason I wanted to come here and chat with you was because of the pro days this week. And Washington was very active in their presence at the pro days. This is a big week for all of the quarterbacks. It started with Kenny Pickett on Monday. It progressed to Malik Willis on Tuesday. Ohio State had their pro day today, and then Thursday, Matt Corral will have his pro day at Ole Miss. So, I mean, it's a whirlwind this week. A lot of big time pro days, and Washington had a presence at every single one to this point. It is now Wednesday, and they were at the Kenny Pickett pro day, and they were also at the pro day for Malik Willis at Liberty. And now the big pro day for Washington, apparently, because, Ron Rivera's presence. He was not at the Kenny Pickett pro day, nor was he at the Malik Willis pro day, but he did make it his business to be at the Ohio State pro day, which raised some eyebrows because a lot of people, as they brought up eloquently, may add, Ron hasn't attended a ton of pro days, Ron's presence isn't really required at a lot of these functions, and he's not there. He wasn't at the Senior Bowl because I don't think he really cared too much about the quarterbacks that were going to be there. Now, I say that, and he may have had family engagements, and obviously the Commanders were about to launch their new rebrand, and so there were reasons why he may not have been in Mobile, but he wasn't. I mean, I think if he really wanted to be there, he could have been, but he wasn't. You fast forward to now, he's at this Ohio State Pro Day. A lot of people have made the point that, in the past, Ron hasn't been at a number of Pro Days, but the few that he has attended, Cam Newton, Christian McCaffrey, to among others, these are all players that ended up being drafted in the first round, very highly, I may add, by the Carolina Panthers, and thus a lot of people are connecting the dots. And, I love drawing an inference, a good old-fashioned inference. You don't have all the information, but you have enough to formulate and speculate an opinion. And that's what people are doing. They're saying, hey, Ron wasn't at any of the quarterback pro days, but Martin Mayhew and Marty Herney were. But Ron's at this pro day here at Ohio State to watch these wide receivers run around and catch the football. Does this mean Washington's taking a receiver at 11? And my guy Hunter Hodovic brought this up during the podcast earlier today, and I think it's a very good point. I countered with this, and this is just devil advocate, me playing devil's advocate, and I do this from time to time. I'm like, what if Ron was there to see C.J. Stroud? Never seen him up close and personal. Know that kid's going to more likely than not be in the draft next year. Know that there's a very good possibility that we may be right back here again next year, eyeballing quarterbacks. What if Ron wanted to lay eyes on the big future prospect out of Ohio State and not necessarily there to see the wide receivers? It's an added benefit. These are guys that we could draft this year, but he could have been there looking at C.J. Stroud for next year. Who's to say? The reality of the situation, more likely than not, is he was there to see the receivers and wanted to lay eyes on them firsthand. I, myself, am madly in love with the game of one Chris Olave. That is the guy that I would love nothing more than Washington to grab somehow, some way. I would prefer to not have to do it at 11, but if you don't do it at 11, when are you going to do it, right? I would love for them to trade back, right in front of Philadelphia, not behind them, because I think Philadelphia is going to take a receiver. They've got 2 picks. I think the first of which starts at like 16. They're going to take a receiver. I don't think you can trade behind Philadelphia and still get Chris Olave, but I'd love to trade back 2 or 3 spots, pick up some draft capital, and still get Chris Olave. That would make my day. But Garrett Wilson is also a guy that is in the mix. Do not sleep on him as a potential Washington Commander pick at 11 as well. Again, doesn't mean that receiver is going to be the selection just because Ron was there. Vegas seems to think that Washington is going to take a receiver at 11. That's the highest odds. We've seen a ton of Drake London being mocked to Washington. I don't think, even though I've advocated for Washington getting a big receiver, big body, physical guy, I still want to add more speed. When Curtis Samuel was out, Terry was all the speed that we really had. DeAndre Carter gave us a little boost and shot in the arm, but we lacked speed. And for as much as I loved De'Ami Brown, he was hurt. So was Curtis Samuel, and it was just Terry once again. And so I would love to add another technician route runner in Chris Olave, but also a guy that could take the speed off of the top off of the defense, which Olave can do. I don't think that that's who De'Ami Brown is. I've said this already. De'Ami Brown wasn't a technical route runner when we drafted him. He was a one-trick pony that wanted to show people that he could do more than just get vertical. But he didn't do anything at North Carolina. All he did was essentially stop routes and go balls. So he's still a work in progress in terms of route running, whereas Olave comes in as a polished technician ready to do work, and then also showed us the ability to get over the top, of DBs, and then showcase that speed at the combine as well, just in case you weren't sure. So Olave, really appeals to me and what we could use opposite of Terry. And so Ron being in attendance does raise some eyebrows. It is impactful. He's not there for his health. He is there for a reason. I think he is interested in those receivers. I think he is also, taking a little peek-see at C.J. Stroud as well, just in case. He's hoping that he does not have to go down that avenue, because if he does, that means Carson Wentz did not work out. If he doesn't, that means Wentz went in and did exactly what they were hoping he was going to do. So he hopes he does not have to explore that C.J. Stroud avenue, but in the event that he does, it's always good to know that I've seen this kid up close and personal, maybe had a conversation with him, introduced myself, let him know that I think he's super talented and keep up the good work, that sort of thing. And so it'll be interesting to see what comes from this pro day. But right now, all the speculations are that Ron and company are interested in taking a receiver, and this was a huge step in that direction with Ron accompanying the rest of the gang to the pro day and watching these receivers run around and make plays. So I'm interested in what you guys think Washington's going to ultimately do at 11. I've talked about this already. I think that you have to get a linebacker with one of your first two picks, whether it's a pick at 11 or the pick at 47. You have to take a linebacker. So if you don't take one at 11 and you don't take a wide receiver at 11, to me, receiver is the one that you can push back a bit, because as we stated, and as I stated, I can't speak for you, my list of priorities going into the offseason was as follows. 1, quarterback. 2, middle linebacker. 3 was the secondary, corner / safety, and then 4 was wide receiver. So for me, wide receiver can be pushed back a bit in terms of the draft. Being that you don't have a third-round pick, it gets dicey after the first 2. And not having a third-round pick hurts, because that bridged the gap between the second and the fourth round, and you're like, hey, if I don't get a receiver in the first or second round, there should still be some really good receivers that I like in the third round. We keep talking about how deep of a draft class it is at receiver, but if you wait too long and all of a sudden you don't have an opportunity to take one until the fourth round, you run the risk of finding another AGG. You know what I'm saying? Like, eventually we are going to run out of the guys that you really want. Okay, so not having that third round pick takes away the luxury of being able to say, hey, don't have to grab a receiver at 11. Hell, don't even have to grab one at 47. We can still grab one in day number 2 in the third round and feel really good about that receiver. That's when we got Terry. That's when we got Antonio Gibson. You can feel really good about that third round pick. We don't have that pick this year because of the Wentz deal, and that stings. So it makes the first round pick at 11 and the second round pick at 47 that much more important and impactful, and thus the crowd that's starting to get louder and louder about trading back makes a ton of sense. I've talked about this since that Wentz deal. For me, trading back became a much bigger reality. Don't know if that's what's going to occur. Again, if they love a guy at 11, take him. I'm not about trading back and picking up a bunch of picks and getting a mediocre player in the process when you can get an elite player and be done with it. I'd much rather have the elite player and deal with the consequences of not having that third round pick. However, if you can trade back, pick up a couple of picks, and still get an elite player, I'm on board with that as well. So we'll see what happens. Again, it takes 2 to tango. We don't get to just trade back. Somebody has to want our pick. We'll see how the draft board falls and what ends up happening. I think there's going to be extreme spillage that comes our way at 11, and it's going to make it pretty hard to pass up on some of the talent that's going to be staring us in the face at 11. But you can also use that as trade bait to move back and pick up picks and still get a quality football player, all the while picking up more draft capital, which we know we can use, being that we only have 6 selections in the upcoming 2022 NFL draft. So what do you think Washington's going to do at 11? What do you think they ought to do at 11? What do you think they're going to do at 47? And is 11 too high to take a receiver? Do we have to take a linebacker with one of our first two picks? I imagine that if you don't get a linebacker at 11 or 47, all the good linebackers are dried up by the time you get to the fourth round. This is why that third round pick is so important because, you know, the 49ers stud linebacker was a third round pick. The Colts stud linebacker was a second round pick. You don't have to get a first round linebacker, but the further you get back into the draft, once you get into day 3, things get a little dicey. All bets are off. I'm a day 1, day 2 guy. When you're looking for elite stuff, you can find it in day 1, day 2. It gets harder, much harder once you get into day number 3. We don't have 3 day 1, day 2 picks like we had in the past. We only have 2. And so we've got to make the most of them. We'll see what we do. I want to hear from you. What do you think happens at 11? And Ron Rivera being at the Ohio State pro day, does it mean anything? Or is it, or as Ron likes to say, is it important or is it interesting? You be the judge. Right now, it's interesting. It could turn out to be very, very important. You tell me what you think. Anyway, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on the Command Post. I am a Washington fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, post up and take command. You guys enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow night on the Command Post Live. Until then, you guys have a good one. Take care.
LouieTeeNetwork.